So, there. Thanks, Katie. So, I'm Melissa Newts, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Campaigns and Advocacy Director here at MEIC. I just want to start tonight by having us take a moment to remember the millions of Indigenous people that lived across this continent, stewarding these lands for thousands of years before Montana even became a state. And today we have over 500 Indigenous nations still engaging with these lands, including and not limited to the following across Montana: the Assiniboine Sioux, Blackfeet, Cheyenne, Chippewa and Cree, confederated tribes of the Salish, Kootenai and Pend Oreille, Crow, Gros Ventre, and the Little Shell Band of Chippewa Cree. So like those before us, we must strive to be in good relationship with this land and work for a clean and healthful environment to sustain future generations. So thanks for joining us in this work and being here with us on Zoom again tonight. So as you probably remember, a lot has happened in the last month since we met last to talk about methane gas. So I want to tell you, when we planned this event, we were expecting that Anne and the rest of us at MEIC would have access to all the expert reports that would have been submitted to the Public Service Commission, or the PSC, as they were looking at NorthWestern's proposal for this project. So what you were going to hear tonight would have included a bunch of expert testimony around this issue. But since NorthWestern pulled their application about a week before the deadline, the reports hadn't been submitted, even though a bunch of people did a lot of work. So just know that what you're hearing tonight is a little bit different than what you would have heard. But it'll still be great because it's Ann Hedges. And so I want to take a moment to introduce Ann. If you don't know Ann, her pronouns are she and her. She co-directs our work here at MEIC alongside our executive director, Carrie Kimball. Ann has been with MEIC since 1993 and is our director of policy and legislative affairs. She directs all legislative, policy, and legal work here at MEIC, and she's worked on a wide range of topics related to pollution throughout her career. Her current focus includes climate change, fossil fuels, clean air, and energy, to name just a few. So please help me welcome Ann. Virtual welcome for Ann.
Thank you, Melissa. So I'd love this to be informal. And so if you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. And if I see it, I will do my best to respond to it while we're moving through this. There's a lot of information that's going to be presented tonight, but there's even far more information that is not going to be discussed. So if I can't answer your questions, we will find an answer for you after tonight. So please, let's make this somewhat interactive if we could, so that I'm not just talking at you. But let's start. Thank you, Melissa, for that introduction and qualifier, because we really had hoped to see all of the expert reports and thought we would have a very good sense of what's going on. A lot of what the experts were going to be submitting was going to be privileged. We wouldn't be able to see it, but we would be able to see their conclusions and some of their analysis. So we're at a loss to some degree, but fortunately, Earth Justice is not going to lose, who was our attorney in that PSC proceeding. They're not going to lose the expert information. They just didn't have it in a nice, handy report for us. But tonight we're going to talk about the NorthWestern Laurel gas plant. I'm calling it a methane gas plant because that's what scientific journals are starting to call it, fossil methane gas. Methane gas is shorter. So we're really focused these days we remain focused on coal, of course, but as you heard last month, we're very focused on trying to find ways to reduce methane gas. Methane is a huge problem for reaching the Paris Accord targets of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And as the head of the IPCC said over the summer, reducing methane is the easiest knob to turn to change the path of global temperature in the next 10 years. And I want to go over a couple of the things we talked about last month, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands why that is true. So one of these days, I'm going to learn to make a PowerPoint presentation that accounts for the fact that there's people in the corner. So let me diminish all of you so I can see the whole screen. But this right here is a super simple description of how the gas system works, the gas delivery system works. Gas, what some people call natural gas, is 85 to 95% methane. It's only natural when it's underground. Once we bring it out of the ground, it's no longer natural. Humans have altered where that gas lives, and that gas, as methane, is really interfering with our climate. But this is the system that we currently have, that in which on the left-hand side, you can see we have gas wells where gas is extracted from the ground. You have some gas that is captured, very little of it, in the oil process. Gas and oil are found together frequently. So a lot of times if the price of oil is high and the price of gas is low, they just waste that gas. But gas does come up with oil frequently. That gas then moves through a series of pipelines where it is separated. They take out the water. Throughout this process, there's a lot of venting and flaring that occurs. Venting and flaring meaning they want to get rid of the gas. So they just let it loose into the atmosphere, or they burn it where it turns into a CO2. It goes through processing plants. They use processing plants to remove certain products and use certain things, but then it keeps going through the system through compressor stations. So gas, when it's in a pipeline, needs to be pressurized. It needs to flow through that pipeline. In order to do that, you have to compress it. These compressor stations are located throughout the system, and they help move that gas through the system all the way to the end product with end users at the far right, which are consumers, industrial users, businesses, homes, residences. That's where gas ends up. And this whole process from the very beginning all the way to the end is riddled with pipelines. And last month I showed you a map of all the pipelines, large pipelines in the United States. I'm not going to show you that tonight, but just trust me, there are a lot of miles of pipeline in this country. Now, for how gas is used, the US, this is for the United States, has been increasing its reliance on gas. And it is projected to continue to increase its reliance on gas. In particular, in the electric sector, we're seeing a large increase projected in gas between now and 2050. That looks fairly flat, but actually there is a curve in there. There is an increase that is anticipated. And here's where you can see that. The production, you can see that in the 1940s, we used very little gas. The curve rose up until the 70s, and then it started going down again. And then it rose until about 2020, and it's been rising really significantly in recent years. And the projections are, as you can see here on the right-hand side, and I tried to line these two charts up, the projection is that it is going to continue to grow. So we are going to continue to see tight shale formations being used to extract gas. The problem in the whole process that I showed you in the previous slide, or the slide 2 slides ago, is that gas leaks. This is a really old and leaky system. And so in every stage of this process, gas is leaking out and getting into the air. Sometimes it's intentional by the producers and the people who are moving the gas in pipelines. And sometimes it's not. It's just that we have old equipment. We have leaky valves and flanges and things like that. We have old infrastructure in a lot of areas of this country. So overall, about 2.3% of gas, I think it's 2.3% of gas in the system is lost because of leaks. At the production level, so that's at the wellhead, that's where you see most of your loss of methane gas. And the gathering, where they take all those wells and they put them in pipelines and take them to a central station, that is where you lose the second most. Transmission, as we said, the transmission system, which is pipelines, are also incredibly leaky. Processing, and then distribution. Distribution are your small pipelines that take gas from the bigger lines all the way into the homes and businesses to the end use. The problem is all of this leaky infrastructure has contributed to this problem, which is the atmospheric levels of methane. And as you can see, we've all seen the Keeling curve where you see how CO2 has increased over time. This is a similar type curve where we're really seeing a significant increase in the concentration of methane in the atmosphere. And that is the problem. And that's the problem because, as I said last month, there is a great study that came out in the journal Nature last month, and it analyzed what it would take to reach or to stay under, let me rephrase that, what it would take to have a 50% chance of staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise. And what that study showed is that it looked at gas, it looked at coal, and it looked at oil. And what it showed for fossil methane gas is that while we're about right here, right now, we need to, in the United States, as it says down here, we need to reach peak gas production by last year. If we are going to meet the Paris Accord target, we need to immediately begin reducing our reliance and use of methane gas. And if you can see that black line, that's where the United States needs to go. This is daunting. That means we have to reduce our reliance on methane gas by about 3% per year. Otherwise, we are going to blow past 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we have a utility, NorthWestern Energy, that is intent on building new gas plants. And it has been working on this concept of building new gas plants and making a whole bunch of money for quite some time now. This is nothing new. So in 2015, NorthWestern had a resource procurement plan, which is a plan that utilities are required to submit to the Public Service Commission to say, this is how we're going to meet the energy needs of our customers for the next 20 years in a cost-effective way. And the resource procurement plan is a very big deal. It's a very long process, and it is supposed to be continually updated every 2 to 3 years, updating these resource procurement plans so that the Public Service Commission has the most information it can have when the utility comes and says, we want to build something new. The Public Service Commission will tell the utility, well, was it in your resource plan? Did you analyze this? Is this part of the energy mix that you have projected is necessary for the next 20 years? Well, what happened in 2015 is NorthWestern did a resource procurement plan, but it hid its modeling. It didn't release how it arrived at a need for more gas. And in that plan in 2015, it really did not look at any other resources in a reasonable manner. The plan favored gas, it disadvantaged solar and storage and wind. And so the PSC concluded that NorthWestern's plan was deeply flawed. And it said, the commission pre-approval, this is a quote from what the commission told NorthWestern, commission pre-approval of resources, so that's the Laurel generating station, that's what NorthWestern was looking for, based on the analyses and results in the 2015 plan, would almost certainly not be in the public interest. In other words, NorthWestern had not done its homework, it had not showed its work, and it did not convince the commission that it had done what was necessary to charge customers for a new resource. So NorthWestern went back to work. And in 2019, it was really 2020, but in 2019, NorthWestern came up with a new plan. And in that plan, NorthWestern once again hit its modeling. So modeling is this process it goes through. It's a mathematical computer model in which you have inputs, and then They go through a whole bunch of series of analyses, and out comes a price. So what is it going to cost for certain resources? And when you can tinker a lot with those models, and what NorthWestern does is it hides everything in that model so nobody knows how its conclusion, surprisingly, always comes up that gas is the best resource for its portfolio. We have tried to get access to NorthWestern's model, and we have failed. So in 2019, the resource plan, again, was looking at, it said, NorthWestern said it needs 800 new megawatts of new gas and no solar and no wind and no storage. Well, as you can see in the picture at the bottom, this is a picture of the Bozeman hearing. Montanans showed up in droves. There were hundreds, over 600 people showed up at these hearings across the state and said that NorthWestern Energy hadn't shown its work, it hadn't proved its case, and that it had rigged the system to reach a conclusion that only gas could fulfill its needs. And in fact, the commission agreed. When the commission finally got its turn to say what it thought of the plan, its conclusions were very similar to what the public had said. And this is one of the statements: the concerns and deficiencies addressed above, which is a long list of concerns and deficiencies, are substantial enough that they call into question the adequacy, accuracy, and value of the 2019 plan. That's a really, that's what I call shredding NorthWestern's work. Well, the commission didn't come out with its final decision and analysis until mid-2020. But in early 2020, before NorthWestern heard what the commission thought of its plan, NorthWestern went out for bids on a new resource. And what NorthWestern did when it went out for bids, asking companies to bid in and say if they want to build a new resource for NorthWestern, they created a system in which really the only bids that were going to be acceptable, because of the criteria they established, were going to have to be gas. And so, surprise, surprise, NorthWestern, after putting out these bids, it chose through its contractor its own gas plant as the most reasonable and appropriate generation resource to move forward with. So NorthWestern has been looking for years to build a gas plant. We'll talk a little bit later about why that is. And what they came up with was this: the Laurel generating station, which is a methane gas plant just outside of Laurel, Montana. This is Laurel. This is the Yellowstone River right here, if you can see my cursor. And this is where NorthWestern intends to build the Laurel generating station. Now, the details of the station are as follows. It's intended to be a 170 megawatt gas plant. It's going to have 18 reciprocating internal combustion engines. Those are RICE units. The plant is going to operate from about 2024 till 2057. If anyone thinks that we're still going to be using gas in 2057, you know, you may as well just buy a match and light all of our forests on fire. It is absolutely absurd to think that we will still be burning fossil fuels in 2057. We're in big trouble if that's the case. The company received an air permit for the plant in August of 2021, but it can't build the plant quite yet because it needs to have a zone change from the community of Laurel, and it needs at least a stormwater discharge permit and probably a water pollution discharge permit. And it is not applied yet for either of those permits, as of last week anyway. The plant is slated to be 300 feet from the Yellowstone River. Keep that in mind. 300 feet from the Yellowstone River. And then noise. You know, if you had to live next to this plant, and there are homes next to this plant, the noise level is loud. It's going to be 65 decibels at 600 feet. So people on the Yellowstone River are going to be hearing this, this plant. 65 decibels it's loud. And for context, we negotiated an agreement when we stopped the Highwood generating station, which at the time was proposed to be a coal plant. They came back with a gas proposal. And we negotiated an agreement with them that allowed them to build that gas generating unit. But we had a whole bunch of conditions that we wanted from them. And the most important one for the folks who lived in the area was noise. And we negotiated an agreement with the developer of that plant to limit noise to 42 decibels. That was in 2010. And here Northwestern is in 2021 saying 65 decibels is acceptable. This is a logarithmic scale. When you look at noise, these decibel levels are on a logarithmic scale. So 65 decibels is a lot louder than 42 decibels. I could go further on this, but it is unconscionable that to me, that Northwestern would build a facility next to homes that is going to be so loud. The EPA standard for noise is just a guidance, but EPA says anything over 55 decibels will interfere with public health and safety. So noise is a serious, can cause serious health problems if you are constantly exposed to it, especially at high levels. And EPA says 55 is the most that you should have. This plant's going to be at 65 decibels, 600 feet away.
Hey, Ann.
Yes.
Melissa here. Just for context, I think when we were talking about it, you described them as jet engines. Is that right?
Yes.
So
yeah, these things
jet
are
engines.
Yeah, 18 jet engines. Think of them as jet engines because that's what jet engines are. They're burning a gas. They are really loud. That's how they've always been described to me anyway. So 18 jet engines next door. How's that for neighborly? So air pollution. Let's go through quickly some of the air pollutants that we're going to be seeing from this plant. It would emit about 1,000 tons each year of air pollutants. 94 of those tons each year would be hazardous air pollutants like benzene, formaldehyde, hexane, toluene, and xylenes, plus quite a few more. These are the types of things that they get airborne, they're volatile, and they lead to leukemia, they lead to all sorts of health problems. So it's not something you really want exposure to on any regular basis. The plant is proposed to be located in a non-attainment area for sulfur dioxide, yet the environmental assessment failed to consider the impact that this additional SO2 could have on that non-attainment area. In fact, they blew off the non-attainment area and said, this is a small increase, and so what's a little more? Well, a non-attainment area is an area that is not meeting health-based air quality standards. So if it's non-attainment, that means it's already a problem for meeting health standards. Adding anything more should be unacceptable. But instead, DEQ really blew that one off. And then, of course, there's greenhouse gas emissions, both methane and carbon dioxide. This wasn't the slide I wanted next, but it's the slide we have next. So here we go. There's going to be a pipeline associated with this. They have done very little. Northwestern has done very little to disclose this pipeline. They told the Public Service Commission that they had purchased a pipeline at the end of 2020 and that they were converting it. It was an oil pipeline coming up from Wyoming. You can see the pipeline here on this purple line. That's called the Byron line. They're converting an oil pipeline to a gas pipeline, and they're not giving us any information about the cost. In fact, and they're putting it underneath the Yellowstone River so it can get to the plant. In DEQ's analysis, it said, we're not going to study the pipeline. In the Public Service Commission application, Northwestern's application to the Public Service Commission for pre-approval, which it has since withdrawn, it told the Public Service Commission that it didn't want the Public Service Commission to consider the pipeline at all because it was going to charge its gas customers for that pipeline. So it is unconnected to the plant. And of course, the plant can't operate without this pipeline. You can't have a methane gas plant without methane gas. That's what the pipeline does. It provides the plant with its fuel. And instead of looking at the entire system, both DEQ and the Public Service Commission were not requiring the company to disclose the cost of that pipeline or the impacts of that pipeline, including the drilling underneath the Yellowstone River. And as we know, pipelines leak about 2.3% of their product each year. So that methane that's coming out of that pipeline should have been considered in DEQ's analysis. It should have been considered by NorthWestern, and instead, nobody has considered this at all yet. Here's probably what we are most concerned about, although there's a lot of things to be concerned about with this plant, and it's the greenhouse gas emissions. Right now, they're projected by NorthWestern to be 769,000 tons of CO2e each year. What is CO2e? It is how you make all of your various greenhouse gases equivalent in impact. So you say, we know what the impact of CO2 is. Let's put methane in the same terms, so we're comparing apples to apples. So all told, all in, the greenhouse gases, according to NorthWestern, are going to be 769,000, about 250,000 tons of greenhouse gases from the plant each year. But let's talk about what's missing. Fugitive emissions from the well. We know that there are a lot, as you saw in one of the early slides, that a lot of methane leaks from wells. Those are called fugitive emissions, emissions that were not intended to leak. There are a lot of fugitive emissions at the wellhead. They're not accounted for. We know pipelines leak. We know they leak about 2.3% of their product each year. We know that pipeline companies, if they're fixing a line, first off, pipelines leak, but also when they fix lines, so they have a line and they need to fix something in the middle, they turn valves at each end, at various ends of the problem section. And then generally they just vent whatever's there, whatever's remaining in the lines, to the atmosphere, and then they fix that line. So there's a lot of venting that occurs in the pipeline industry, especially when they're doing any type of maintenance. And then you have compressor station leaks. And what does all of this add up to? Back to the IPCC. All of this adds up to code red for humanity. We have got to do something to prevent moving in this direction and committing ourselves to this type of emission scenario until the 2057. And as a side note, somebody reminded me this morning, I don't know if Gary's on the line or not, but that NorthWestern is going to be paying a one-time carbon offset of 21,000 tons of carbon dioxide. I want you to compare that to the number here. NorthWestern is saying they only have to offset the carbon for 21,000 tons. And so they're going to pay about $300,000 to a carbon offset program. That's about $15 a ton. Annual offsets for greenhouse gas emissions should be, if you use the proper number up here, the 750,000 tons, they should be paying closer to $11 million a year. And then if you looked at what the federal government uses, which is called the social cost of carbon, which is an analysis of what the impact, there's a spelling error there, sorry about that. The social cost of carbon is a federal analysis of what is the impact of carbon dioxide monetarily on society. And they looked at it in a really comprehensive manner. And so you really get a number that's between $35 a ton and I think it's upward of $70 a ton. So I chose $50 a ton for CO2. If you use the social cost of carbon and said that is what the impact of this plant would be on society because of greenhouse gases, you would get $38 million a year or $1.3 billion over the course of this plant that NorthWestern should have to pay to offset this facility. That's the impact that it's going to have. And when we start looking at how much we're paying each year in fires, in drought, what agriculture is suffering when we have droughts like we have in the past year, you really start to understand how those numbers add up so quickly. So let's talk briefly about the cost of the plant. So NorthWestern is once again hiding the ball. The cost of the plant, NorthWestern likes to say construction is going to cost $375 million. And they act as if It's free after that, after customers are charged $375 million to build it, or NorthWestern builds it and passes on those costs to us. They like to stop the analysis there and pretend like there are no more costs that need to be considered, when in fact, that's like saying you bought a house and the roof is leaking and the floors are caving in and you have no windows, your windows are broken. Of course, construction is not where it ends. And we've learned that really well at Colstrip, right? Plant maintenance, super expensive. Annual plant maintenance, I know at Colstrip, is really high. Pipeline construction and maintenance, all of those costs have not been considered in that $375 million construction price tag. Taxes, fees, interest on any kind of loans they're getting for this, none of that is included. And then fuel. And this is the piece that really grates on me, because as people know, in the last couple months, we've seen real volatility in the fuel, in the gas market. You can see here, this is a recent from Henry Hub spot price. So this is kind of an indicator for everybody about what gas is costing generally across the country. They look at the Henry Hub spot price for gas. And as you can see, gas prices between 2020 and 2021 have increased a lot. Gas is a really volatile resource. NorthWestern is ignoring the price of gas and what it will cost to fuel this facility every single year in its analysis of the price of electricity. Instead, NorthWestern loves to ignore it because they know they get to pass that cost straight through to customers. We will pay it. They don't want to analyze it up front and say this is what it will cost. And considering NorthWestern does not have a fixed price contract for that fuel, that means that as gas prices remain volatile, that customers are going to be on the hook for that volatility. Our gas, when there's, for example, it's a really cold winter and there's competition between using gas to generate electricity and using gas to heat our homes, heating our homes is going to come first. So what happens when NorthWestern can't access gas because there is a sharp spike in demand? We're going to be heating the homes first, and electricity is going to come second. NorthWestern is either not going to be able to run this plant, or it's going to have to pay a small fortune or a large fortune in order to run this plant during those times. This is not theoretical. This happens all the time. So when you fail to consider all of these costs in the price of a plant, you are failing to consider some of the biggest price tags that customers are going to end up paying. So why is NorthWestern hiding the ball? Because it pays. I love this photo for this purpose. NorthWestern is hiding the ball. In the back is a background, is the ocean. And as NorthWestern hides the ball on methane emissions and the real cost of carbon, oceans are going to rise. But for NorthWestern, it's Christmas time, because NorthWestern gets a 10% or so rate of return on every dollar it spends to construct this facility and the pipeline. So the more money NorthWestern spends to build this facility, the greater its potential rate of return. It's ingenious, right? So a company has no incentive to spend less money in construction if it can get its costs recovered with a guaranteed rate of return going forward for a lot of its costs, like pipelines and construction. That's, it's the reason that NorthWestern doesn't want to get rid of Colstrip, because it's earning a 10% rate of return on the money it initially invested into that plant, $407 million way back in 2009. And it gets that 10% rate of return as customers pay off that plant until 2042. It's the same thing here. When NorthWestern spends money, it's like Christmas time. They make money. That's why it's really important to consider all of these costs before we start moving forward on something as big as a gas plant that can have such impacts. So What else could Northwestern do to meet its capacity needs? You know, unfortunately, this is where all of the experts that were going to be submitting testimony, their expertise was going to be very, very specific. We don't get to see that. But we do know a lot about energy efficiency and demand side management. We know that NorthWestern Energy excluded energy efficiency from being able to bid into its request for proposals in 2020. Energy efficiency is the cheapest energy there is. In other words, if you don't have to generate energy, you save money. And there are so many opportunities to decrease our need for electricity, whether it's helping people insulate their homes. Northwestern got rid of its audit program that I spoke about last month. They used to do energy audits on people's homes to help you save electricity, save heat, and they got rid of that program. Now you can just do a little thing on its website with a little check mark. Oh yeah, I have insulation. You know, it used to be somebody would crawl up into your attic and look and see how much insulation you had. So NorthWestern Energy is really dropping the ball on energy efficiency and demand side management, and those are really low hanging fruit. Storage plus renewable energy, and there's no air or water pollution. When there's a huge solar energy spill, it's just called a nice day. Storage is it's going gangbusters now. The technology is really coming along quickly. And NorthWestern Energy, time and time again, ignores the opportunity for solar plus renewable or storage plus renewable energy. And that is penciling out for a lot of other utilities across the country. For some reason, NorthWestern just doesn't think it will for it. I would say NorthWestern is not unique. And the last one is regional cooperation. And this one really cannot be under or overstated how important regional cooperation could be. We have an electric system that is connected to all sorts of other places. And in the West, unlike in the East, we have balkanized our energy systems in such a way that each utility has been going it alone. And that's a really inefficient way to go about business. So sharing power across the region is an amazing opportunity available to utilities. And there's one program called the Energy Imbalance Market, where utilities trade short-term energy with each other. When, for example, they're having a storm on the West Coast, we can generate wind and we can send our wind that way. When there's an outage of a gas plant in one area, other areas can provide them with cheap electricity instead of them having to fire up a more expensive resource. And what utilities have found since 2014 is the gross benefits from the EIM since 2014 are $1.42 billion just since 2014. NorthWestern Energy joined the EIM on June 16th. And in the second quarter report for the EIM, it shows that NorthWestern Energy saved over $1 million for customers in 2 weeks. The quarter ends at the end of June. In 2 weeks' time, NorthWestern saved customers over $1 million by joining the EIM. And there's a lot of talk about trying to create a bigger regional market that is longer term. And there's a lot of work that's going into that. And that is a great solution for utilities all over the Western United States to be able to trade power on a longer term basis and utilize each other's cheapest resources, which are wind and solar. I mean, time and time again, there's no fuel cost associated with wind and solar. So it's just, it is a great idea to move the West away from this balkanized system and get utilities like NorthWestern working with other utilities in the region to share power and figure out how to run the cheapest resources first, instead of firing up their most expensive resources just to meet their own needs and letting other utilities next door waste energy. It's a crazy system that we've developed, but there's a lot of movement in the right direction for regionalization, and it could really help. So what can we do? MEIC, I'm thinking of MEIC, and I say we because all of you, I assume, are members of MEIC, and I really appreciate that because it helps us survive and do the work that we do. The first thing we can do is participate in every permitting process and PSC process that we can think of. So far we've been doing that. And if NorthWestern applies for a water quality permit, for example, we will find out, we will know, we will participate in that, we will let you know. We can prevent NorthWestern from charging customers for the plant. So NorthWestern pulled back from its request for pre-approval for this plant, but it intends to build this plant and then come back to the Public Service Commission and ask for permission to charge customers for the plant and its operations. And NorthWestern should not be reimbursed. It should not be able to pass off the cost of this facility. The risk should be borne by NorthWestern shareholders. The risk of a future carbon cost, the risk of pipelines leaking, the risk of the plant being really expensive and really not operating in a regional market because it's too expensive to run. NorthWestern shareholders should bear that risk, not customers. And we really need to try to get the town of Laurel to require limits on noise and lights, just for the sake of the poor folks who just happen to live nearby. Through no fault of their own, they were there first, and they are going to get a rude awakening based upon noise and light if this plant gets built. So I have some ideas on that, but trying to help them get some limits on that should the plant be built. And then finally, this is our victory for today. Challenge NorthWestern in court. Today, MEIC, Earth Justice, on behalf of MEIC and Sierra Club, filed suit against the Department of Environmental Quality and NorthWestern Energy for violating the Montana Environmental Policy Act in its approval of this gas plant. That 11-page environmental assessment was cursory at best, failed to consider climate impacts. It failed to consider alternatives that were available to NorthWestern that are better for the environment and better for customers. It failed to consider the pipeline and its impacts of drilling underneath the Yellowstone River. It failed and it failed and it failed time and time again. So today in Yellowstone District Court, we filed a court action. And I'm really excited about it. I think the world of Earth Justice. I think they're brilliant attorneys. And so cross your fingers. But we intend to challenge this in court if we have the opportunity, and this is our opportunity. So then the question is, what can you do? And there's a few things that I would ask of you. The first, write to the city of Laurel and ask them to require noise and lighting restrictions before they rezone the property. They could be rezoning the property as soon as next week. So this is urgent for the folks who live there. They deserve better. We have, I believe, Melissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If we haven't set it up yet, we are going to set up an action on our website. You can go to our website and you could send a note to them through our website that requests that they limit noise and lighting pollution.
And
yes,
Katie got that set up just while you were doing your slideshow. So there's some like populated text, but you can change it and edit and personalize it. So it's in the link in the chat.
So I urge you all to do so. Thank you, Katie. Katie and Melissa are lifesavers. You can also go to our website and you can sign a petition to Bob Rowe, who is the CEO of NorthWestern Energy, and tell him to invest in clean energy. We've heard through the grapevine that Bob says he never hears from anybody about wanting more clean energy. So we decided to set up a petition, as have other organizations, telling Bob exactly what we think and letting him know. And so we'll be delivering those petitions to him soon. And I urge you to share that with your friends. Please do that as we move forward. I'll stop there. Support organizations like MEIC who are working to oppose the plant. There are a lot of organizations working to oppose this plant. 350.org was one of the first organizations to sue over this back in May. They were suing over NorthWestern's use of the pre-approval process. I'm not sure what's going to happen now that NorthWestern has withdrawn their pre-approval application. I'm hoping that lawsuit can continue, but I don't know if it can. 350 does great work. Earth Justice does great work. Sierra Club does great work. They're all wonderful partners. We have so many wonderful partners in this space. Everybody is starting to really understand the impacts of methane and how we can't solve the climate crisis if we keep moving forward with these types of proposals. So be a joiner. Stay tuned for NorthWestern's next filing. MEIC will absolutely let you know when NorthWestern files, and we will engage on your behalf to push back on NorthWestern being able to charge customers for the plant. And then on a personal note, try to use less gas. We all use gas in our homes. Not all of us, but a lot of us do, to heat our homes, to cook. And there are ways that you can decrease your need to use gas. You can insulate your home a little bit more. That's just the easiest way to do that. You can do what I did, get an induction burner, put it next to your gas stove, and use your induction burner instead of your gas stove as your go-to for cooking. And when you look at a water heater and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, go with an electric hot water heater. There's all sorts of little things you could do in your daily lives to limit your use of gas. But the most important thing we can do is stand up to utilities like NorthWestern Energy, who are going to lock us into relying on gas for another 25, 35 years. And that's it.